Hey there, friends. Um, More and more it seems like a lot of people are choosing to go the small house route. It used to be mainly that the maybe empty nesters were the ones that would move out of their big houses and into smaller houses, mainly because they don't need so much space anymore with the kids being gone. But more and more it seems like it's the younger generation that are doing it. It's the people who are just getting into their first house, brand new to the housing market, and they're buying smaller ones on purpose because they don't want to, get themselves into a debt trap. And maybe a little more middle-aged types of people who already are established in their lives, maybe moving into smaller houses because they are forced to, because different things with the economy, of course, or things with their jobs or things like that may have changed things and made it so where the big house that they once were able to afford, they no longer can afford. So it seems like people in all walks of life are moving into smaller houses, and with good reason, because there's a lot of benefits to living in a smaller house. Of course, the smaller house is usually going to cost less, and so there's a smaller mortgage, which is a huge plus. In addition, the smaller houses tend to be less expensive to heat and to cool, as well as less expensive to maintain. Less space for the house means less, repairs to have to do. If you have 4 bathrooms, there's probably going to be a lot more that could go wrong with those 4 bathrooms than if you only have 1 or 2 bathrooms, those types of things. You know what I'm saying? Just less to maintain all around. So, people are really finding out that less is more. Less of a house means you have more money to live on, and maybe even more freedom to do the things you want to do because you've downsized. But there are definitely some ups and some downs. So just to give a little background, my husband and I got married, late January now. I guess it's about 9.5 years ago. And we bought our first house right away, just a few days after we got married. And we bought a small house on purpose. We wanted to make sure that we were buying a house that we could afford, We wanted to have our house and live in it too. And it seemed like when we went to find out how much we could afford for a house, and got pre-approved for a loan, they said, oh, you can afford this much for a house. And I looked at the amount that we'd have to pay every month, and I'm like, that's way more than I'm paying in rent now. I don't think I could actually afford that much. So I decided to go ahead and get a shorter mortgage because I knew that the housing market was kind of shaky and there was a chance that housing prices could go down. And by getting a shorter mortgage, a 15-year mortgage instead of a 30-year, I'd be able to build up equity right away. That way we wouldn't end up with ourselves underwater, stuck in a house that's, we owe more than it's worth. So you really can't sell it. And if you short sell it, then that causes all kinds of problems. You have to pay back all this money and you end up in all this debt and all this stuff. I just didn't want that. I didn't want to end up with a house that we were underwater in, and I also didn't want a house that was going to be really expensive. So even with a 15-year mortgage, they said this is how much you can borrow. We borrowed a little bit less than that even still. So I made one of the things that at the time people called one of the biggest real estate mistakes. They called it underbuying or something like that. Yeah, underbought. Everyone kept telling us we underbought. But anyway, but we did that on purpose because I knew that I wanted to be able to afford the house once we got in there. I knew things were going to happen. And you know what? They did. Just like everyone's lives, it seemed like, there's going to be bumps in the road. Right after we got married and moved in, several months later, I found out that we were expecting our first child. And then 2 years after that, we had another one. And, children are expensive. Not so much to raise necessarily, because we can get, clothes secondhand and things like that. We did cloth diapers and other things to make it so they weren't so expensive, but, actually going to the doctor's appointments and being at the hospital to have the baby and things like that, those are obviously very big expenses. And so, having bought a house that made it so where we were able to keep up with those kinds of bills and things was really helpful. It was really helpful. If we would have gotten the 30-year mortgage, our house went down in value, so we would have ended up underwater. And if we would have gotten, the biggest house we could possibly afford, with the biggest mortgage, then who knows if I would have been able to keep up with those medical bills. You know, we could have ended up filing for bankruptcy and things. So we've really been able to avoid a lot of the problems in life that many people have. I mean, my husband changed jobs several times. He was working for one company, they didn't make enough money. Worked for another company, he got hurt all the time, ended up going to the hospital twice just in the few months he was there, and broke his bone and all this stuff, you know. So during between jobs and, you know, being injured from work and being out of work from that sort of stuff, there's been a lot of different things that have come up over the last almost 10 years. So having bought a small house was really beneficial to us. So anyway, I don't want to go on and on about me. I want to make this so it's relatable to you. But I have some different advices for you if you're considering it, or if you're already there, how to help deal with it. Because it's really not that big of a deal. I really love living in our small house, and I ask my kids all the time, you know, do you really like it here? And they're like, oh yeah, we love it here, you know. So I asked them if they would want to move, and they said they never want to move. So, you know, if they're happy here and we're happy here, and the only people who are unhappy with us here is our friends and relatives, what does it matter? They're not the ones who have to pay for it. They're not the ones who have to live here. So it doesn't matter what they think, which brings me to maybe one of the biggest downfalls of buying a small house is that everyone is going to come against you. Maybe not everyone, you might have some good friends and family that'll support you, but it seems like when we did it, it was kind of before it was even commonplace, you know. Back then it just wasn't done. People don't buy small houses on purpose. You know, a young family's supposed to go and buy the biggest house you could possibly afford. What were we doing going against the grain? So a lot of people made fun of us, you know. This is the smallest house I've ever seen, you know, maybe this will be a good starter house, but you'll outgrow it. There's no way you're going to live here for that long, and yada yada. And it didn't end up working out that way. We're still here, and we're totally happy, like I said. So, if you do end up choosing to go into the small house, make sure that you are secure with that decision, and that you can put on some thick skin, because you're probably going to end up taking some stuff from the people who aren't going to understand. But if this is the decision that you're making because you feel like it's the best decision that you can for your family, then do it. Do it for your family so that you can better provide for them, you know, if that's the means that you have to do so. So, okay, so now maybe move on to the advice as far as living in the house itself. The first thing I would say that's important to do is to downsize and declutter. Stuff like furniture, lots and lots of big furniture can really make a small space feel really small. So maybe when you choose different things, choose smaller things, or, you know, downsize. I mean, the estimates of how much clothes that we own and how much of them we actually wear is ridiculous. I mean, there's lots of different statistics out there, but somewhere between 10 and 30% of our wardrobes is all that we wear. I mean, somewhere between 90 and 70% of our clothes we never wear. So if we're not using them anyway, why not just get rid of them? Because then we don't have all that, you know, stuff cluttering up the space, and that'll make it so that there's more space. Because less is really more. Less space makes it, less stuff makes it so we have more space. So downsizing and decluttering is definitely important if you're going to choose the small house. The second thing I would say is to choose space-efficient furniture. Stuff that works in the space better than maybe other things would. Or to choose space-efficient appliances. Things like, you know, our kitchen's small, and I never thought that we would be able to fit a dishwasher in, but when we, you know, fixed some things up a while back, we were able to put in a little 18-inch dishwasher. There's no way we could have fit a full-size 24-inch, but the 18-inch one did fit, which was nice. So different things like that, you know, even though the space is small, by choosing a space-efficient appliance, we were able to still get, you know, what we really wanted out of it. Or like multitasking furniture. This is huge. Stuff that isn't just one thing. Like this couch turns into a bed. So if we wanted to host some guests here, you know, this living room could turn into a guest room. Or the ottoman this camera is sitting on right now isn't just an ottoman where we can put up our feet. It stores blankets in one side and books, like my cookbooks and things I use all the time, or library books and things I've gotten, in the other side. And it's right where I need them. If somebody's cold, you know, you're sitting on the couch, you can get to the blankets really easily. Where we read is usually around here, so the books are right there, so they're easily accessible. And this piece of furniture is multitasking. And I have many other examples like this. My kitchen table has a bench that opens up for extra kitchen gadgets, you know, that I don't have other space for in the kitchen. My kids' bed, is like, it's kind of like a bunk bed, but it's not a true bunk bed because bunk beds have two beds. But that's a good another suggestion. If you have a smaller room and two kids you need to fit in there, obviously a bunk bed's a good suggestion. But their bed is on the top, and then on the bottom there's all these shelves and drawers, and there's a desk, and other things like that. And so in the space that the bed would take up, there's actually a bed plus a desk and several drawers and shelves and things like that. So it's really a space efficient option. And there's lots of different things out there like that. If you want to make an office into a guest bedroom also, but there isn't enough space for the bed all the time, there's those Murphy beds that you can pull off from the wall and things like that. There are lots of cool options available that make it so that your space can multitask and be a lot more space efficient. So I definitely recommend choosing your furniture carefully, stuff that fits in your space and that can multitask also. The next thing I would recommend is find vertical storage solutions. There's only so much floor space, so instead of having something that maybe takes up a lot of space this way, it takes up a lot of space that way. Something like a mail sorter. Instead of having a basket of mail sitting on the counter, making the counter feel cluttered, why not have something that's up on the wall, that you can stick the mail in so that the counter is free of space. Things like that. Bookshelves that are really tall rather than wide. Things like that. Utilize the upward spaces that you have in your house. It's just like vertical gardening, By vertical gardening, you can double or triple the amount of stuff that you can grow in the amount of space. Well, you can double or triple the amount of things that you can store just by using those upward spaces on the walls and things like that. So that's very helpful. And also look for out-of-the-box solutions for storage. We have a stairway, and right above the stairway is this kind of awkward spot, as the stairs are going down. There's this awkward spot above it we've made into our entertainment center. And then underneath the stairway, there's a bathroom down there. And there's like a storage cutout where we can keep all kinds of other things. We've kept various things under there, but we made extra storage space there. So there's different types of storage solutions that you may not, necessarily think of right away or whatever, but other people are using to help increase the storage spaces too. So there's kind of like these, definitely think out of the box when it comes to finding storage solutions. And then my last suggestion is actually the most important. That's why I saved it for last. Is to keep the house clean. It's actually a very, very important thing because we're all guilty of it at some point, or at least I am, or our family is what I mean. But if I'm doing a project and I take out a bunch of tools or something like that, and then I set them all on the kitchen table and I leave them there, well then nobody else has a table to sit at, to eat at, whatever, to work at. If my husband is doing something at the computer and he's got all these papers out and then he leaves them there, then, you go to use the computer and there's, very limited amounts of space over there. Or if my kids come out and they want to make, do puzzles and they get out all the puzzles and put them all over the floor, and then they decide they want to play with blocks, so they get out all the blocks and put those all over the floor, and then they decide they want to play with dress-up clothes and they get all the dress-up clothes out and it's all over the couch. Next thing you know, there's nowhere to walk because the stuff is all cluttered all over the floor, and it feels like there's nowhere to sit, and all of a sudden the clutter feels like it's caving in on you. You know what I mean? So it's very important to pick up after yourself every single day and all the time throughout the day. So if the kids are, using the puzzles, after they're done using them, they need to put them away before they can get out the blocks. And after they're done with the blocks, they need to put those away before they can get out the dress-up clothes, things like that. I need to make sure that I'm putting away my tools after I'm done with my project. And my husband needs to put away his paperwork after he's done. And once everything has a place, and we're keeping those things in their places, then the clutter doesn't feel overwhelming and the house feels bigger. Because clutter, a little bit of clutter in a big house doesn't feel like much, but a little bit of clutter in a small house feels like a lot. So definitely that's why I think that my last suggestion of making sure you keep the place clean and everybody's picking up after themselves is actually the most important part, because the most space efficient furniture and all the storage space on the walls in the world doesn't really help if all the stuff is cluttered all over the place and not being kept in the places where it's supposed to be. So I hope this was helpful to you. When I first was trying to find different ways to deal with it, because along the way, we've made so many mistakes. We did the furniture mistake and bought all this stuff that didn't make, sense for the spaces and things like that. So I was trying to find how other people were dealing with it, so I looked on the internet and it was like, oh, how this couple moved from a 3,800 square foot house down to a 2,000 square foot house. And it was like, I just rolled my eyes because I'm like, oh, 2 people in 2,000 square feet? My house is 4 people living here, and when we purchased it, it was a 900 square foot house. And then several years ago we added on. It was a 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom. Now it's a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, and 1,100 square feet. 1,100 square feet, which really isn't that big. Some people may say it's big. People that are part of the tiny house movement may say that's big. People that are in the big house thing still, the 2,000 square foot ranch that takes up a ton of space, would obviously think 1,100 square feet for a family of 4 is small. But that's why I think it's the happy medium, It seems like a lot of people are all about the big, and then there's those that are for the small, and I feel like the middle ground was what was best for us. Nothing that's going to make us feel too cramped, We're not going to live in a shed as a family, but we also don't need something that's going to take forever for us to pay off either, or something that was, going to make it to where we could potentially, not make it and end up like a lot of the people that, had circumstances that made it so they weren't able to stay in their houses. So that's why we chose to do what we did. We made sure to buy a smaller house that we could afford, and if that's something you're considering, then I definitely recommend it. There's a lot of things you can do, like I said, to help it feel not so cramped. So I hope you found this video helpful, and if you are considering a small house or you're living in one now, then maybe you can live large in a small house. So I'm Frugal Green Girl. Thanks for watching.